Rain tapped against the dining room windows that Sunday afternoon, creating a rhythmic backdrop to what should have been a pleasant family meal. The scent of rosemary chicken lingered in the air, but our plates remained untouched. My son-in-law Drew's confident smirk dominated the room as he slid a stack of contract papers across my polished oak table, the same table where I'd helped my daughter, with her homework, celebrated birthdays, and built dreams for my clinic. "Here it is," Drew announced, his voice too smooth, too rehearsed. "Jessica will take over Healing Pathways. Of course, you'll still have your little piece, 25%. You can retire peacefully now, Diane." The words pierced me like scalpels. My daughter's eyes dropped to her lap, guilt flickering across her face. My hands remained perfectly still, folded neatly beside my untouched plate. He thought I was defeated. He believed I was too naive, too sentimental, too blind to fight back. But I had been preparing for this moment for years. Without a word, I reached for the leather folder resting beside me. Slowly, deliberately, I opened it to reveal a single contract page marked in yellow highlighter. "Clause 4.3, I said softly, sliding it forward. Drew leaned in, still smirking, until he read it. His face turned crimson. When his own lawyer, Thomas Green, cleared his throat and confirmed the clause was valid, signed and enforceable, the silence cracked wide open. In that moment, I wasn't just a mother or a woman sitting quietly at Sunday lunch. I was Diane Caldwell, the builder of my own legacy, and the person who had just dismantled his arrogance with one decisive move. This is my story. 27 years. That's how long it took me to build Healing Pathways Physical Therapy Center, from nothing but a dream and student loan debt that kept me awake at night. I still remember the day I signed the lease on our first location, a tiny office space tucked between a laundromat and a convenience store in downtown Seattle. The landlord had looked skeptical when I explained my vision. A clinic where patients weren't just numbers, where treatment wasn't rushed, where healing happened on multiple levels. "You sure about this?" he'd asked, eyeing my worn shoes and the sleeping toddler. My Jessica clutched against my hip. "Healthcare is a tough business, especially for—" He didn't finish the, sentence, but he didn't need to. "Especially for single mothers. Especially for women without connections or family money." I signed the papers anyway. The early years were brutal. I'd wake at 5 a.m. to prepare Jessica's lunch, drop her at daycare, see patients from 7 a.m. until 6 p.m., pick up Jessica, make dinner, put her to bed, and then spend hours on paperwork and marketing until my eyes burned. Sleep was a luxury I rarely afforded myself. "Mom, why don't we have a big house like Mia's family?" 6-year-old Jessica had asked once, her innocent question cutting straight to my heart. "Because we're building something even better," I'd told her, pulling her onto my lap. "Something that will help people feel better when they hurt. Something that will be ours forever." By the time Jessica reached high school, Healing Pathways had expanded to a modern facility with 8 treatment rooms, a hydrotherapy pool, and a staff of 15. Patients came from across the state for our innovative approach to chronic pain management. We'd been featured in medical journals. We'd won awards. It was during this time that I met Richard, my first business partner. A brilliant physical therapist with a head for business, Richard approached me after hearing me speak at a conference. "Your methods are revolutionary," he'd said over coffee afterward, "but you could be helping 10 times more patients with the right backing." Richard's investment allowed us to expand again, adding specialized equipment and hiring more staff. But I was cautious. Before signing our partnership agreement, I insisted on Clause 4.3, a provision that protected my controlling interest in the clinic, regardless of any future restructuring. My lawyer had raised his eyebrows when I insisted on such specific language, but I'd had a feeling, even then, that I needed to protect what I'd built. "It's not that I don't trust you," I'd explained to Richard. "It's that I've spent my life building this. I need to know it will always reflect my vision." Richard had understood. He'd signed without hesitation. Our partnership flourished for 8 years until his retirement, at which point I bought back his shares. By then, Healing Pathways was a Seattle institution. Jessica had grown up amid the pulse of the clinic. As a child, she'd done homework in my office, colored pictures for patients, and eventually worked summer jobs at the reception desk. I'd always hoped she might follow in my footsteps, perhaps even take over one day, but only if that was her genuine passion. When she announced her plan to study business instead of healthcare, I supported her. "You need to build your own dreams," I told her, even as a small part of me mourned the shared future I'd imagined. Then came Drew Collins. Jessica met him during her final year of business school. Tall, polished, with an MBA and ambition that radiated from him like heat. At first, I was impressed by his confidence and charisma. He seemed to genuinely care for Jessica, bringing her flowers, planning elaborate dates, making her laugh in ways I hadn't heard since she was a child. "He's going to do big things, Mom," Jessica had gushed during one of our weekly dinners. "He's already been offered 3 positions at top firms." I'd smiled, happy for her happiness, ignoring the small voice in my head that whispered, "He's calculating. Watch him." The first time Drew asked about the clinic's finances, the question seemed innocent enough. "Impressive operation you've built, Diane," he'd said during a Thanksgiving dinner, 2 years into his relationship with Jessica. "What's your annual revenue these days?" I'd given a vague answer, changing the subject, but I noticed how his eyes swept around my home, assessing, appraising. I saw how he nodded slightly when I mentioned expanding our chronic pain program, as if filing away the information for later use. After he and Jessica married in an extravagant ceremony that made me wince at the cost, Drew began stopping by the clinic unexpectedly. He'd chat with my administrative staff, asking casual questions about patient load and insurance reimbursements. He'd suggest upgrades and modernizations that always seemed to involve spending more money. "You know," he said once, standing in my office doorway, "with Jessica's business background and my connections, we could turn this place into a regional powerhouse. Multiple locations, corporate contracts." I'd looked up from my patient files. "Healing Pathways isn't about size, Drew. It's about quality of care." His smile hadn't reached his eyes. "Of course. I'm just saying, there's untapped potential here." The comments continued, growing more frequent after Jessica announced her pregnancy. Suddenly, Drew was concerned about my workload, my stress levels, my age. "You should be enjoying life at this stage," he'd insist, his tone dripping with false concern. "Let the next generation take the reins." I began to understand his game, but I never expected the ambush that came that rainy Sunday, when my son-in-law tried to take everything I'd built with a smile on his face and contracts in his hand. The invitation had seemed innocent. Enough. Jessica called on Wednesday, her voice bright but slightly strained. "Mom, can we do Sunday lunch at your place this weekend? Drew and I have some exciting news to share." My heart lifted. Perhaps another grandchild on the way? Little Emma had just turned 2, and Jessica had mentioned wanting siblings close in age. "Of course, sweetheart. I'll make that rosemary chicken you love." "Great. And is it okay if Thomas joins us? Drew's friend from law school?" That should have been my first clue. Thomas Green wasn't just Drew's friend. He was the corporate lawyer Drew consulted for all his business ventures. Still, I agreed without hesitation. Family gatherings had become rare enough that I welcomed any opportunity, regardless of the guest list. I spent Sunday morning preparing. The house smelled of herbs and warm bread when they arrived, Emma toddling in first with arms outstretched for her grandmother. "There's my sunshine," I said, scooping her up and breathing in her baby shampoo scent. Jessica followed, looking beautiful but tense in a navy dress that seemed too formal for a family lunch. She kissed my cheek distractedly, her eyes darting around as if searching for something. Drew and Thomas arrived last, both in business casual attire that felt oddly formal for the occasion. Drew carried a leather portfolio under his arm. "Diane, always the perfect hostess," Drew said, kissing the air near my cheek. "Thomas, this is Jessica's mother, the founder of Healing Pathways." Thomas extended his hand. "I've heard so much about you and your clinic, Mrs. Caldwell." We settled at the dining table, Emma secured in her high chair. Conversation remained superficial throughout the appetizers. Weather, traffic, Seattle's latest restaurant openings. An underlying current of tension made each word feel charged, like electricity before a storm. It wasn't until I'd served the main course that Drew cleared his throat. "Diane, we've been thinking about your future." My fork paused halfway to my mouth. "My future?" "Yes. You've worked incredibly hard for nearly 3 decades. You've built something remarkable. But at some point, every founder needs to think about succession planning." I set my fork down carefully. "I've given it thought." "Good." Drew smiled broadly. "Because we have the perfect solution." He reached for the portfolio he'd placed beside his chair and removed a stack of documents, sliding them across the table toward me. "We've prepared everything. Jessica will take over as CEO of Healing Pathways, with me as COO handling the business operations. You'll maintain a 25% stake, of course. enough to provide a comfortable retirement income while freeing you from day-to-day responsibilities. I didn't touch the papers. Instead, I looked at Jessica, whose eyes remained fixed on her plate. Jessica, is this something you want? She finally met my gaze, conflict evident in her expression. I think it makes sense, Mom. You're approaching retirement age. The clinic needs fresh ideas to stay competitive. And with Emma growing up so fast, this arrangement would keep healing pathways in the family while giving you the rest you deserve. Her words sounded rehearsed, as if Drew had coached her on exactly what to say. I recognized the phrases. They were the same ones Drew had been dropping into conversations for months. I see. I took a sip of water, buying time. And what would happen to our current staff? Our treatment philosophy? Drew jumped in before Jessica could answer. We'd maintain the core of what makes healing pathways special, while implementing necessary upgrades. Some streamlining would be required, of course. Efficiencies to be found. Streamlining, I repeated. The word hung in the air like a threat. I knew exactly what it meant. Firing longtime staff, cutting corners on treatment times, prioritizing profit over patient care. Thomas has drawn up all the necessary paperwork. Drew continued, tapping the documents. As Jessica's husband and a business professional, I'm uniquely positioned to help transition the clinic into its next chapter. We could finalize everything by the end of the month. I noticed how he said we while meaning himself, how Jessica seemed to shrink beside him, how Thomas watched the exchange with the detached interest of someone who'd seen this scenario play out before. 25% seems rather low for the founder, I observed quietly. Drew's smile tightened. It's actually quite generous, given market conditions. Most founders exit with far less. Besides, you'd be relieved of all operational responsibilities. All responsibilities, I echoed. And all authority. That's business, Diane. Evolution. Progress. He leaned forward, lowering his voice as if sharing a confidence. Between us, your methods are becoming somewhat outdated. The industry is changing. Without fresh direction, healing pathways could find itself obsolete within 5 years. The insult was deliberately calculated, designed to sting, to make me feel ancient and irrelevant at 53. Drew knew exactly how to twist the knife, questioning. Not just my business acumen, but my clinical expertise. I watched him sitting there, so confident in his custom-tailored shirt, so certain of his victory. He thought he'd backed me into a corner. He believed that maternal love would force my hand, that I would sign away my life's work rather than create conflict with my daughter. Emma chose that moment to drop her spoon with a clatter. The sound, broke the tension momentarily as Jessica leaned over to retrieve it. Why don't you tell me about these necessary upgrades you envision? I suggested mildly. Drew's face brightened. He clearly interpreted my question as interest rather than what it truly was. Reconnaissance. For the next 15 minutes, he outlined his vision for healing pathways. Corporate wellness contracts, accelerated treatment schedules, a new billing system that would maximize revenue capture, expansion to 3 new locations within 18 months. With each word, the clinic I'd built with care and personal sacrifice morphed into something unrecognizable. A profit machine with my name still on the door, but none of my soul inside. Throughout his monologue, Jessica remained silent. Only the whitening of her eye. Knuckles around her water glass betrayed any emotion. When Drew finally paused for breath, I smiled and said the 4 words that would change everything. Let me get something. I rose from the table and walked calmly to my study. Inside the top drawer of my desk sat a leather folder I'd prepared years ago for exactly this moment. I'd updated its contents regularly, watching Drew's ambition grow, sensing this confrontation was inevitable. When I returned to the dining room, the conversation had stopped. 3 pairs of eyes tracked my movements as I resumed my seat and placed my folder beside my plate. Before we go further, I said, there's something you should know. The dining room fell silent as I opened my leather folder. Inside was a single document with a bright yellow highlight. Across one paragraph. Clause 4.3 of the original partnership agreement I'd signed years ago. You're all so concerned about my clinic's future, I said, my voice steady despite the anger simmering beneath. But there's something you should review first. I slid the document across the table. Drew snatched it up, his confident smile never wavering until his eyes found the highlighted section. Then, like watching a building collapse in slow motion, his expression crumbled. This can't be binding, he muttered, more to himself than to me. This is... His face flushed crimson as he thrust the paper toward Thomas. Thomas adjusted his glasses and read carefully. I watched the lawyer's professional mask slip momentarily as understanding dawned. Well, Drew demanded. Thomas cleared his throat. Clause 4.3 states that healing pathways cannot be restructured, sold, or have its leadership changed without the express written consent of the founding partner, Dr. Diane Caldwell. This clause remains in effect for the lifetime of said founding partner and is binding on all future contractual agreements. That's impossible, Drew snapped. Partnership agreements can be amended with majority. Consent. Not this one, Thomas replied, his discomfort evident as he continued. This clause was specifically designed to be irrevocable. It was signed by all subsequent partners and stakeholders, including, he glanced at Jessica, any family members who might eventually hold interest in the company. Jessica's head jerked up. I never signed anything like that. You did, sweetheart, I said, gently. When you turned 18. Remember that summer you worked in administration? The paperwork you signed wasn't just an employment contract. Recognition flickered in her eyes. At the time, she'd barely glanced at the documents, eager to start earning her own money. I'd explained the partnership provisions, but she'd been more interested in which weekend shifts she'd be working. Drew's hand came down hard on the table, rattling the silverware. This is manipulation. You tricked your own daughter into signing away her rights. I protected my legacy from people exactly like you, I replied calmly. People who see value only in dollars, not in healing. People who would dismantle decades of careful work for quick profit. Thomas? Drew turned to his lawyer, desperation edging his voice. There must be some way around this. Thomas looked uncomfortable as he placed the document back on the table. The clause appears legally sound. Dr. Caldwell clearly had expert legal counsel when drafting it. He looked at me with newfound respect. It would be extremely difficult to contest in court. Difficult, but not impossible, Drew insisted. Actually, impossible, I interjected. Because there's more. I withdrew several more documents from my folder. Bank statements, invoices, loan agreements, and patient testimonials. Each told a piece of my story, a story Drew had never bothered to learn. While I was eating ramen noodles to pay off my student loans, I was funding Jessica's private school tuition, I said, placing the first document on the table. While I slept on a treatment table during our first year of operation because I couldn't afford both rent and clinic expenses, I was covering your honeymoon to Bali. Another document joined the pile. And while you've been planning to modernize my outdated methods, those same techniques saved Senator Wilson's career after his stroke last year. His testimonial is right here. Emma began to fuss in her high chair. Sensing the tension, Jessica automatically reached to comfort her, but her eyes never left the growing stack of papers. Mom, she whispered, I had no idea. Of course you didn't, I said without anger. I never wanted you to worry about money or feel burdened by my sacrifices. That was my choice as your mother. But it doesn't mean those sacrifices didn't happen. And it certainly doesn't mean I'm ready to hand over control to someone who doesn't understand or respect what went into building healing pathways. Drew's lawyer shifted uncomfortably. Perhaps we should continue this discussion another time, he suggested, closing his briefcase. Family matters are clearly at stake here beyond the business considerations. There's nothing to continue, I stated firmly. My answer is no. Healing pathways will continue under my direction until I decide otherwise. Drew stood abruptly, his chair scraping loudly against the hardwood floor. This isn't over, Diane. Family businesses evolve. Leadership changes. It's inevitable. Nothing in business is inevitable except the consequences of arrogance, I replied, maintaining my composure. And right now, you're facing those consequences. He stormed out without another word. Thomas mumbled apologies as he followed, leaving Jessica, Emma, and me alone in the sudden, heavy silence. Jessica wouldn't meet my eyes. She busied herself wiping Emma's face, though our meal had barely begun. I didn't know, she repeated quietly. About the clause, about the loans, about any of it. Drew just said, she trailed off. What did Drew say? She sighed. That you were working too hard. That the clinic needed modernization to stay competitive. That we would be helping you by taking over the day-to-day stress. Her voice hardened slightly. He never mentioned cutting staff or changing treatment protocols until recently. By then, he'd already convinced me it was the right thing for everyone. I reached across the table and took her hand. The right thing for whom, Jessica? For the patients who depend on consistent care? For the staff who've been with me for decades? For you who never expressed interest in running a physical therapy clinic? Her silence was answer enough. Sweetheart, I've always wanted you to find your own path. If that path genuinely led to healing pathways, I would welcome you with open arms. But as a partner, not as part of a hostile takeover. Jessica's eyes filled with tears. I don't know what I want anymore. Drew has been so focused on this plan, on our future, on what he calls building our empire. I just followed along because it seemed easier than questioning him. I squeezed her hand. That's not the strong woman I raised. I know, she whispered. I'm sorry, Mom. So sorry. Emma chose that moment to throw a piece of chicken, breaking the tension. Jessica and I both laughed despite ourselves, the sound releasing some of the afternoon's heaviness. Take your time, I told her as she gathered Emma's things. Figure out what you truly want, not what Drew wants for you. Healing Pathways isn't going anywhere. After they left, I sat alone at my dining room table surrounded by the remains of our uneaten meal. The rain had stopped, leaving streaks on the windows like tear tracks. I should have felt triumphant. Instead, I felt tired and sad for my daughter, caught between her husband's ambition and her mother's legacy. My phone buzzed with a text from Jessica. Can I come by the clinic tomorrow? I want to really see what you've built. A small smile lifted the corners of my mouth as I texted back, always welcome, 10 a.m. Perhaps something good could come from this confrontation after all. Not a transfer of power, but a renewal of understanding. Monday morning arrived with unusual clarity for Seattle. Sunshine streaming through breaks in the clouds, glinting off puddles from yesterday's rain. I arrived at Healing Pathways at 6:30 a.m., as I had nearly every workday for 27 years. The familiar routine soothed me. Unlocking the front door, starting the coffee in the break room, reviewing the day's appointment schedule. My staff filtered in gradually. First Maria, our head physical therapist who'd been with me for 15 years, then Keisha, our newest PT assistant, but already beloved by patients, followed by administrative staff and the rest of our clinical team. I'd hired each person carefully, valuing compassion and dedication over impressive resumes. Together, we'd built something special, a place where patients felt seen, where healing happened not just physically, but emotionally. None of them knew about yesterday's confrontation. I'd decided to keep it private, at least until I understood what Jessica's next move would be. At 9:55 a.m., I was finishing notes on Mr. Peterson's progress when Carol from reception buzzed my office. Dr. Caldwell, your daughter is here. Send her back, please. Jessica appeared in my doorway moments later, looking different than she had yesterday. Gone was the formal navy dress, replaced by jeans and a simple blouse. Her hair was pulled back in a casual ponytail, her face free of makeup. She looked younger, more like the daughter I remembered before Drew. Hey, Mom, she said hesitantly. I stood and hugged her. Where's Emma? With the sitter. I wanted us to talk without distractions. She glanced around my office, the walls lined with degrees and certifications, shelves filled with medical texts and framed photos of staff celebrations, the worn leather chair where I'd sat with countless patients discussing their recovery plans. I realized I haven't really been here. Really looked at what you've built in years. Come on, I said, taking her hand. Let me show you. For the next hour, we walked through Healing Pathways as it came alive for the day. I introduced Jessica to newer staff members and reacquainted her with longtime employees who remembered her as a child coloring in the break room. We observed treatment sessions where patients worked through pain with determination, guided by therapists who knew not just their medical histories, but their personal struggles and triumphs. In the hydrotherapy room, Jessica watched as Maria helped Mrs. Gonzalez, an elderly stroke patient, regain movement in her right arm, progress that had taken months of gentle, consistent work. We've been working with Mrs. Gonzalez for almost a year, I explained quietly. Insurance wanted to cut off her treatment after 3 months, claiming she'd reached maximum improvement. We appealed and won. Now look at her. Mrs. Gonzalez was smiling as she successfully grasped a floating ball, a simple action that represented monumental progress. That's why we don't rush treatments, I continued. That's why we fight insurance companies when necessary. Why we maintain caseloads that allow therapists to truly know their patients. It's not the most profitable model, but it's the right one. Jessica nodded slowly. Drew's plan would have changed all that, wouldn't it? Yes, I answered honestly. His streamlining would mean shorter sessions, higher patient loads, less individualized care. More money, less healing. We continued to the community room, where a free senior exercise class was underway. 15 elderly patients moved carefully through gentle stretches, their faces showing concentration and occasional winces, but also determination and camaraderie. We started this program 10 years ago, I told Jessica. Many of these participants can't afford regular PT, but this keeps them mobile, independent, connected. It doesn't generate revenue directly, but it fulfills our mission. It matters. By the time we returned to my office, Jessica's expression had transformed from uncertainty to something like wonder. "I had no idea," she said, sinking into the chair across from my desk. "I mean, I knew you helped people, but seeing it like this..." She gestured vaguely. "This isn't just a business, is it?" "It never was," I replied simply. "Not to me." Jessica's phone buzzed insistently in her purse. She glanced at it and grimaced. "Drew, that's the 5th time he's called this morning." "You should talk to him," I said. "Not yet, I'm still processing everything." She looked directly at me. "Drew didn't come home last night. After he left your house, he checked into a hotel. Sent me a text saying he needed space to recalibrate our strategy." I raised an eyebrow. "Strategy? For what?" "For getting control of healing pathways, I assume." Jessica's voice hardened. "I checked our shared calendar this morning. He's scheduled meetings with 3 different law firms this week. He's not giving up, Mom." "I didn't expect him to," I said. "Men, like Drew, don't accept defeat easily, especially from women they've underestimated." "What are you going to do?" I smiled slightly. "Nothing. I'm going to continue running my clinic, seeing my patients, living my life. Drew can schedule all the legal consultations he wants. Clause 4.3 is ironclad." Jessica hesitated, then asked the question I knew had been brewing since yesterday. "Why didn't you ever tell me? About the sacrifices, the loans, sleeping in the clinic? Would it have changed anything?" I countered gently. "You were a child, then a teenager, then a young woman finding your way. My struggles weren't your burden to carry. But maybe if I'd known, I wouldn't have taken so much for granted." Her voice broke slightly. "Maybe I would have seen Drew's plan for what it really was. Earlier." I reached across the desk and took her hand. "We can't rewrite the past, Jessica, but we can learn from it." The intercom buzzed. "Dr. Caldwell, your 10:30 is here," Carol announced. "I should go," Jessica said, standing. "Thank you for showing me everything." At the door, she paused. "Mom, I don't know what happens next with Drew and me, but I want you to know I'm sorry, and I'm proud to be your daughter." After she left, I sat quietly for a moment, allowing her words to sink in. Then I straightened my lab coat, composed my thoughts, and went to meet my next patient. Life continued, regardless of family drama. Healing waited for no one. That evening, I arrived home to find 3 voicemails from Drew, each progressively less cordial than the last. The final one contained a thinly veiled threat. "Diane, we need to talk about a reasonable path forward. Family disputes like this can get messy when they become public. Think about Jessica, about your granddaughter, about your reputation in the community. Call me back." I deleted the messages without response. Drew underestimated me if he thought vague threats would succeed where his initial scheme had failed. I'd weathered far worse storms building my clinic than an entitled son-in-law's wounded pride. As I prepared a simple dinner for one, my phone rang again. This time it was Richard, my former business partner. "Diane," he said without preamble when I answered, "I just got the strangest call from a man claiming to be your son-in-law, asking questions about our old partnership agreement, and specifically about Clause 4.3, thought you should know." I sighed. "Thank you, Richard. I appreciate the heads up. Everything okay over there?" "Just family drama," I replied, keeping my tone light. "Nothing to worry about." After we hung up, I sat at my kitchen table, staring out at the darkening sky. Drew was getting desperate, reaching out to former partners, likely hoping to find some weakness in my legal armor. His persistence was concerning, but not surprising. My phone buzzed with a text from Jessica. "Drew's still not home. Says he's strategizing our future. Asked me to send him all the clinic financial reports I could access from your home computer." I didn't. Pride swelled in my chest at her small act of defiance. Perhaps the daughter I'd raised was finding her strength again. I texted back. "Good. Take care of yourself and Emma. The rest will sort itself out." As I prepared for bed that night, I realized the coming weeks would likely bring more conflict, more tension, more difficult conversations. Drew wouldn't surrender easily. Jessica faced painful choices about her marriage. My clinic might face scrutiny it didn't deserve. Yet despite it all, I felt strangely at peace. For 27 years, I'd protected and nurtured healing pathways through recessions, regulatory changes, personal hardships, and professional challenges. I would weather this storm too. Before turning out the light, I sent one more text to Jessica. "Remember who you are. Remember what matters. The rest is just noise." 3 days of silence followed the Sunday confrontation, an uneasy calm before what I knew would be a storm. Jessica texted daily updates. Drew remained at his hotel, consulting with colleagues and refusing to discuss anything except through what he called proper channels. She'd taken Emma to stay with her friend Mia, needing space to think away from the empty house that suddenly felt too large, too hollow. I continued my normal routine at the clinic, though I'd quietly informed our office manager and legal counsel about the situation. Better to be prepared. On Thursday morning, as I reviewed patient files in my office, Carol buzzed the intercom. "Dr. Caldwell, there's a Mr. Lawrence Wilson here to see you. No appointment. Says it's about a business opportunity." I didn't recognize the name, but the timing was suspicious. Send him back. Lawrence Wilson was exactly what I expected. Mid-40s, expensive suit, the polished confidence of someone used to getting his way. His handshake was firm but not aggressive, his smile practiced. "Dr. Caldwell, thank you for seeing me without an appointment. I realize how valuable your time is." I gestured to the chair across from my desk. "How can I help you, Mr. Wilson?" He settled himself comfortably. "I represent Cascade Health Partners. We're a management company specializing in optimizing private healthcare practices across the Pacific Northwest." "Optimizing," I repeated. The corporate buzzword immediately raised my hackles. "Exactly. We provide operational support, expanded insurance networks, equipment upgrades, marketing services, while allowing practitioners to focus on what they do best: patient care." I leaned back in my chair. "And you're here because your clinic has an exceptional reputation, Dr. Caldwell. Our analysts have identified Healing Pathways as an ideal addition to our network of premium care facilities. We'd like to discuss a management agreement that would benefit everyone involved." "I see. And who suggested Healing Pathways to your analysts?" Wilson's smile faltered slightly. "We maintain comprehensive market research on outstanding healthcare providers in the region." "Of course," I smiled thinly. "And your visit today has nothing to do with my son-in-law, Drew Collins?" The momentary widening of his eyes confirmed my suspicion before he recovered his professional demeanor. "I'm not familiar with that name," he lied smoothly. "Our interest is strictly based on your clinic's metrics and reputation." I stood, signaling the end of our meeting. "Mr. Wilson, please convey to Drew and to Cascade Health Partners that Healing Pathways is not for sale, not open to management agreements, and not interested in being optimized. My staff will show you out." He remained seated. "Dr. Caldwell, you might want to review our proposal before making a decision. Our initial offer is quite generous." He placed a folder on my desk. 7 figures generous, with continued profit participation and the Healing Pathways name remaining prominent. I didn't touch the folder. "The answer is still no. Healthcare is changing rapidly," he pressed. "Independent practices face increasing regulatory burdens, insurance complications, technology demands. Many excellent practitioners find themselves spending more time on paperwork than patients. Our resources could alleviate those pressures." "Those pressures haven't broken me in 27 years, Mr. Wilson. They won't break me now." Finally, he stood. "At least keep the proposal, Dr. Caldwell. Review it when you have time. My card is inside." He moved toward the door, then turned back. "One more thing. This offer comes with a 48-hour consideration window. After that, terms may be less favorable." After he left, I picked up the folder between 2 fingers as if it contained something contaminated and dropped it into my desk drawer without opening it. Then I called my lawyer. "Claire, it's Diane. Drew's moving faster than expected. I need you to look into a company called Cascade Health Partners, and I need to know if there's any way someone could challenge or circumvent Clause 4.3. "On it," Claire replied. "And Diane, document everything. Every conversation, every unusual visit, every communication from Drew, or anyone who might be connected to him. This could get messier before it's resolved." By afternoon, Claire had called back with preliminary information. Cascade Health Partners was real but relatively new, less than 2 years old, with a pattern of acquiring struggling practices and implementing aggressive efficiency measures that prioritized volume over care quality. "And here's the interesting part," Claire added. "One of their silent investors appears to be Timothy Collins." "Drew's father," I said, pieces clicking into place. "So this is a family operation." "Seems that way. Drew likely went to Daddy for help after your confrontation. As for Clause 4.3, I've reviewed it thoroughly. It's solid, Diane. They can pressure you, but they can't legally force your hand. That evening, Jessica called rather than texted. Mom, Drew finally came home. He's acting weird, super calm, talking about professional solutions and beneficial arrangements for all parties. Did something happen today? I told her about Wilson's visit. Her sharp intake of breath told me this was news to her. Cascade Health Partners? I've never heard of them, but it sounds like something Drew's father would be involved in. They've always been close, especially around business matters. Jessica, I need you to be prepared. This may escalate before it's over. Drew clearly isn't giving up. Her voice strengthened. Neither am I, Mom. I've been doing a lot of thinking these past few days. I've made an appointment with a marriage counselor, and I've told Drew I won't be part of any plan to take over your clinic. Not anymore. Pride swelled in my chest. That took courage. It took seeing what you built through adult eyes, she corrected gently, and realizing I almost helped destroy it. After we hung up, I sat on my porch swing, watching evenings settle over my garden. The rhododendrons needed pruning, the roses needed fertilizing, tasks I'd been putting off with the clinic's constant demands. Yet tending this small patch of earth had always brought me peace, a counterbalance to the intensity of healing human bodies. My phone chimed with a text from an unknown number. The 48-hour window begins now. Be reasonable, Diane. Everyone has their price. What's yours? No signature, but Drew's arrogance was unmistakable. I didn't respond. Instead, I set my phone aside and continued rocking, planning my weekend gardening, rather than dignifying the message with acknowledgement. The next morning brought unexpected visitors to the clinic. 3 of my longest-serving therapists arrived at my office before their first appointments, faces tight with concern. We need to talk, said Maria, clearly the designated spokesperson. We've all received job offers from a company called Cascade Health Partners. Significantly higher salaries, signing bonuses, better benefits. My heart sank. All 3 of you? Kevin nodded. And probably others on staff. The offers came by courier yesterday evening. Very formal, very generous. They're trying to strip the clinic, I said, anger rising. Take my best people, leave me scrambling, force my hand. We're not going anywhere, Lisa assured me. We just wanted you to know what's happening. We've worked with you too long to jump ship because of fancy letterhead and big promises, Kevin added. Maria took my hand. Diane, you've supported us through divorces, childbirths, parent illnesses, graduate studies. You've covered shifts, loaned money, attended funerals. This clinic is family. We're just worried about the younger staff who don't have that history with you. She was right to worry. By afternoon, 2 of our newer therapists had resigned, lured by offers too tempting for early career professionals to refuse. The administrative staff looked nervous, obviously wondering if they'd receive similar propositions. I called an emergency all-staff meeting after the last patient left. I'm sure many of you have received or will receive offers from Cascade Health Partners, I began, facing the concerned faces of my team. I won't ask you to reject them outright. That wouldn't be fair. What I will do is be completely transparent about what's happening. Over the next 30 minutes, I explained the situation. Drew's attempted takeover, the Sunday confrontation, Clause 4.3, and now this coordinated attempt to destabilize the clinic by poaching staff. I can't match their financial offers, I said honestly. What I can promise is what we've always had. Here, ethical patient care, reasonable caseloads, a supportive team environment, and work that actually matters. At Cascade, you'll have quotas, metrics, and corporate oversight that prioritizes profit over people. I paused, looking at each face. Whatever you decide, there will be no hard feelings. You need to make the best choice for yourselves and your families. Just know that Healing Pathways isn't going anywhere, and my door will always be open if you want to return. That night, my phone rang just as I was preparing for bed. Jessica's name flashed on the screen. Mom, she said without preamble, her voice tight. Drew knows about the staff meeting. He's furious. Says you're poisoning employees against legitimate opportunities. We had a huge fight. Are you and Emma okay? We're fine. We're at Mia's again. She paused. I found documents on Drew's laptop. Detailed financial projections for Healing Pathways under Cascade management. Mom, they plan to triple patient loads while reducing staff by 40%. It's all about extraction, not care. Not surprising, I replied, though the specific figures chilled me. There's more. Drew's father is coming to town tomorrow. They've scheduled meetings with your former landlords, insurance providers, even some of your long-term patients. They're trying to create pressure from all sides. Let them try, I said, more confidently than I felt. The clinic has survived worse. After we hung up, I sent a text to Claire updating her on these new developments. Her response was immediate. Full legal protection mode. Come to my office tomorrow at 8 a.m. Bring all documentation. Despite my brave words to Jessica, sleep eluded me that night. I paced my home, reviewing mental contingency plans, trying to anticipate Drew's next moves. By dawn, I'd made a decision. I wouldn't just defend, I would counterattack, not with Drew's underhanded tactics, but with the truth. Claire's office occupied the 15th floor of a downtown Seattle high-rise, all glass, chrome, and quiet efficiency. Unlike many lawyers I'd known, Claire Matthews kept her space deliberately understated, believing flashy decor often compensated for mediocre legal skills. Her record spoke for itself. 30 years of practice, specializing in healthcare law, with a reputation for fierce protection of independent practitioners. They're escalating. Faster than I expected, she said after I detailed the staff poaching attempts. This isn't just Drew anymore. With Timothy Collins involved, we're facing serious corporate tactics. I handed her the folder from Cascade Health Partners, still unopened. They gave me 48 hours to consider this. The deadline's today. Claire examined the documents, her expression darkening. Classic, predatory acquisition strategy. The initial offer looks generous, but these back-end clauses would essentially transfer all control while leaving you with the liability. She tossed the papers aside. Insulting, honestly. What's our counter strategy? Claire smiled. The sharp, precise smile that had intimidated countless opponents across negotiation tables. We go public. Public? I repeated, uncertain. Diane, your clinic has a sterling reputation in this community. You've treated Seattle's athletes, business leaders, politicians, and their families for nearly 3 decades. Your patient satisfaction scores are legendary. Meanwhile, Cascade Health Partners has a growing reputation for diminished care quality after acquisition. She pulled up several documents on her computer. These are complaints filed against Cascade-managed facilities, insurance disputes, patient care concerns, staff turnover issues. Nothing fatal to their business yet, but a pattern is emerging. You want to expose them? I want to expose the attempted hostile takeover of a beloved community institution by corporate interests that don't share your values, Claire corrected. We'll issue a press release. Today, I have contacts at the Seattle Times and several healthcare industry publications. We'll frame it as a David versus Goliath story, which it is. Drew will be furious, I said, thinking of Jessica caught in the middle. Drew chose this battleground, Claire replied firmly. He didn't hesitate to threaten your staff's livelihoods or your clinic's reputation. Why should you hesitate to defend them? By noon, the press release had gone out. By 3 o'clock, I'd received calls from 2 reporters seeking comments. By 5, the first article appeared online with the headline, Beloved Seattle Physical Therapy Clinic Fights Corporate Takeover Attempt. The piece was everything Claire had hoped for. A sympathetic portrait of Healing Pathways' community contributions, contrasted with Cascade, Health Partners' aggressive acquisition tactics and post-acquisition care quality issues. It quoted several former patients praising our approach and expressing concern about potential changes under corporate management. Drew's reaction was immediate and incandescent. His text message consisted of a single line, You've made a serious mistake. I was reviewing the article in my office when Carol A. buzzed the intercom. Dr. Caldwell? There's a Mr. Timothy Collins insisting on seeing you. He's quite emphatic. Timothy Collins, Drew's father, successful real estate developer, and apparently Cascade Health Partners investor. I'd met him only a handful of times at family events, where he'd always regarded me with the faint condescension of someone who measured value solely in financial terms. Send him back, I told Carol. This confrontation was inevitable. Better to have it on my territory. Timothy Collins burst through my office door without knocking, tall and imposing in an Italian suit that probably cost more than most of my staff earned in a month, silver hair perfectly styled, face flushed with anger. What the hell do you think you're doing? He demanded without preamble. That article is defamatory. You've potentially damaged a multi-million-dollar business with these allegations. I remained seated, deliberately calm. Please close the door, Mr. Collins. Patient confidentiality is important here. His jaw tightened, but he complied before turning back to me. You had a reasonable offer on the table. Instead of negotiating like a professional, you've chosen public. Mudslinging. I expected better business sense from you. I didn't seek this conflict, I reminded him. Your son, and apparently you did, when you attempted to pressure me into relinquishing control of my clinic. Pressure you? We offered you fair market value plus generous terms? After trying to manipulate my daughter and ambushing me at a family lunch, I countered. After attempting to poach my staff and threatening my reputation. Those aren't negotiation tactics, Mr. Collins. They're bullying tactics. He dismissed this with a wave. Standard business practices, the strong absorb the weak. It's how markets evolve, how inefficiencies get corrected. There's nothing inefficient about healing pathways, I said, my voice hardening. We've been profitable for 20 years while maintaining the highest patient satisfaction scores in the region. We've pioneered treatment protocols now used nationwide. We've trained therapists who have gone on to lead departments at major hospitals. Just because we prioritize care over maximum profit doesn't make us inefficient. Timothy's expression shifted from anger to calculated reasonableness. Diane, may I call you Diane? You've built something admirable. No one disputes that. But healthcare is changing. Regulatory burdens increasing. Technology costs soaring. Insurance companies squeezing providers. The independent practitioner model is becoming unsustainable. Yet here we are, sustaining. For now, he conceded with a thin smile. But for how long? At what personal cost to you? Wouldn't you rather secure your legacy now, on favorable terms, than struggle against inevitable industry consolidation? I studied him, this wealthy, powerful man so certain of his worldview, so convinced that everything and everyone had a price. In that moment, I saw Drew's future. The same arrogance, the same entitlement, the same fundamental misunderstanding of what truly mattered. Mr. Collins, my answer remains no. Not at your price, not at any price. Healing Pathways isn't for sale. His facade of reasonableness cracked. This isn't just about you anymore. You've dragged my son into a public controversy. You've potentially damaged his professional reputation. Your son dragged himself into this situation through his own actions, I corrected. And if anyone has damaged his reputation, it's been his own choices. Timothy leaned forward, hands on my desk. Listen carefully. That article is just the beginning unless you reconsider. We can make things very difficult for this clinic. Insurance network problems, referral disruptions, regulatory scrutiny. You think you're protecting your legacy? You might end up watching it crumble. I stood, finally allowing my anger to show. Are you threatening me, Mr. Collins? I'm describing reality, he replied coolly. Business is war, Diane. Drew understands that, even if you don't. It's why he'll ultimately succeed where you're still clinging to outdated idealism. I think we're done here, I said, reaching for my office phone. Carol can show you out. Timothy straightened his already perfect tie. Think about my son's offer again. For Jessica's sake. For your granddaughter's sake. Family conflicts like this can leave scars that never heal. After he left, I sank back into my chair, his parting words echoing in my mind. He wasn't wrong about one thing. This conflict was already straining my relationship with Jessica, potentially affecting little Emma's future. Was my stance worth that cost? Before I could dwell on this question, my office phone rang. It was Jessica. Mom, I just saw the article, she said, her voice tight. Drew's threatening legal action against you for defamation. The article contains nothing but facts, I replied. His father just left my office making similar threats. His father came to see you? Jessica sounded surprised. Drew didn't mention that. Mom, this is getting out of control. Drew's talking about having to move, to protect his professional reputation. About how I need to choose sides. My heart ached for her impossible position. What do you want, Jessica? There was a long pause before she answered, her voice stronger than I'd heard in weeks. I want my daughter to grow up seeing integrity valued over profit. I want her to know her grandmother's real legacy, not some corporate version of it. Her voice caught. I want to be proud of the choices I make, the way I've always been proud of yours. Tears pricked my eyes. Then we'll face this together, whatever comes. I'm meeting with a divorce attorney tomorrow, she said quietly. Drew doesn't know yet. I've been moving money to a separate account, gathering documents, preparing. I don't recognize the man I married anymore, Mom. Or maybe I'm finally seeing who he always was. After we hung up, I sat in the gathering darkness of my office, weighing the growing personal cost of this conflict against the principles at stake. Timothy Collins had asked what price I'd accept for healing pathways. The truth was, no financial figure could possibly compensate for what the clinic represented, not just to me, but to our patients, our Staff, our community. Some legacies weren't measured in dollars. Some values weren't negotiable. I turned on my desk lamp and began writing detailed notes about every interaction with Drew, Timothy, and Cascade Health Partners representatives. If they wanted war, I would be prepared. Not with their underhanded tactics, but with the truth, meticulously documented and resolutely defended. The clinic would survive. Jessica would survive. And somehow we would find a way forward that preserved what mattered most. 3 weeks after the article appeared, Seattle was abuzz with the David versus Goliath story of Healing Pathways versus Cascade Health Partners. What began as a single piece in the Seattle Times had expanded into multiple follow-ups, healthcare industry blog posts, and local television coverage. Journalists had uncovered more examples of Cascade's post-acquisition care deterioration, including patient testimonials that broke my heart, stories of rushed treatments, denied care, and impersonal service. Through it all, I maintained a dignified silence beyond my initial statements, letting the clinic's reputation speak for itself. My staff rallied around me, with several who had initially resigned retracting their acceptances of Cascade's offers once they understood the full context of the situation. Drew and Timothy Collins, meanwhile, had launched an aggressive counter-campaign, dismissing the reports as disgruntled patient anecdotes and touting Cascade's modernization of outdated healthcare delivery models. Their corporate speak couldn't mask the reality that patients and providers alike were increasingly skeptical of their approach. On a rainy Thursday morning, I arrived at the clinic to find an unexpected visitor waiting in the reception area, Senator Michael Wilson, one of our most prominent former patients. After a devastating stroke 2 years earlier, he'd come to Healing Pathways when other rehabilitation centers had given him minimal hope for recovery. Through months of intensive, personalized therapy, he'd regained nearly all his function, returning to his Senate duties against medical predictions. "Senator," I greeted him, genuinely surprised. "What brings you here? Not a setback, I hope." He smiled warmly, rising to shake my hand with the left that once hung limp at his side. "No setback, Diane. Quite the opposite. I've been following your situation in the news, and I think it's time I added my voice to the conversation." He'd brought his chief of staff and communications director, explaining that he wanted to hold a press conference on our behalf, right in our lobby, if I would permit it. The public needs to understand what's really at stake when corporate entities try to swallow independent healthcare providers. It's not just about business. It's about patient care, community service, and the human touch that saved my career and countless others. I was moved by his offer, but hesitant. "Senator, I appreciate your support more than I can say, but I don't want to turn this into a political battlefield. This transcends politics," he assured me. "Healthcare quality affects everyone, regardless of party. Besides," he added with a wry smile, "my Republican colleagues across the aisle have been your patients too. 3 of them have already agreed to sign a joint statement of support." The press conference took place the following day. Television cameras, reporters, and photographers filled our modest lobby as Senator Wilson told his recovery story in compelling detail, from the day he couldn't lift a spoon to his triumphant return to the Senate floor. He was followed by other patients. A high school quarterback who'd returned to the field after a career-threatening injury, an elderly pianist who regained the ability to play after a crushing accident, a young mother who walked at her daughter's wedding despite a devastating car crash. One after another, they credited not just the technical expertise at Healing Pathways, but the personalized care, the emotional support, the extra time and attention that made recovery possible. Several explicitly contrasted their experiences with loved ones who had received care at Cascade-acquired facilities, where treatments felt assembly line and rushed. I hadn't organized these testimonials. Senator Wilson and his team had found these patients themselves, reaching out through their extensive networks. Their willingness to speak publicly, to share often painful stories, humbled me beyond words. The final speaker was a surprise even to me, Dr. Eleanor Chen, Chief of Physical Medicine at Seattle General Hospital. She approached the microphone with professional composure. "I'm here today not just as a medical colleague, but as someone who has referred hundreds of patients to Healing Pathways over the years. In our medical community, Dr. Caldwell's clinic represents the gold standard in rehabilitation care. Their treatment protocols have been published in peer-reviewed journals. Their outcomes consistently exceed national averages. Many of our current hospital staff trained under Dr. Caldwell's mentorship." She paused, looking directly at the cameras. "The attempted corporate acquisition of Healing Pathways represents a troubling trend in healthcare, prioritizing profit margins over patient outcomes. As medical professionals, we cannot stand silently while excellent independent care providers are pressured into corporate models that diminish the quality of care. The press conference concluded with the announcement that a coalition of independent healthcare providers across Seattle had formed the Independent Care Alliance, a mutual support organization dedicated to preserving patient-centered, practitioner-led healthcare options. As the cameras packed up and the crowd dispersed, I stood in stunned gratitude. What had begun as a private family conflict had transformed into something much larger, a community stand against the corporatization of healing. My phone buzzed with a text from Jessica. Watching the press conference online. So proud of you, Mom. Drew is livid. Moved the rest of my things out this morning. Emma and I are officially at Mia's until I find our own place. Another text followed immediately. His father called him during the press conference. Overheard fragments. Something about cutting. Losses and PR nightmare. I think they might be backing down. I barely had time to absorb this possibility when Claire called, her voice triumphant. Diane, you need to check your email right now. Cascade just sent a formal withdrawal of their acquisition offer, with a thinly veiled request that we consider the matter closed without further public discussion. In other words, they're waving the white flag. They're giving up? I could hardly believe it. Just like that? Nothing just like that about it, Claire replied. This happened because you stood your ground, because your patients and colleagues rallied around you, and because the Collins men finally realized they'd severely miscalculated public sentiment. Private equity tactics work best in the shadows. Once the spotlight hit them, their position became untenable. Later that afternoon, as the last patient left and staff began preparing to close, Maria appeared in my office doorway, joined by Kevin, Lisa, and several other longtime team members. We have something for you, Maria said, holding a small gift bag. From all of us. Inside was a beautiful silver picture frame containing a photo I'd never seen. The entire staff gathered outside the clinic entrance, smiling broadly beneath the Healing Pathways sign. The frame was engraved, "Some things can't be acquired. Thank you for fighting for us all." Tears filled my eyes as I looked at their faces. These dedicated professionals who had chosen purpose over profit, relationship over revenue. I should be thanking all of you, I managed, for staying, for believing in what we do. We never doubted, Kevin said simply. Not for a minute. That evening, Jessica and Emma came over for dinner, our first normal family meal since the Sunday ambush almost a month earlier. As I watched my daughter helping her toddler with her mac and cheese, I saw new strength in Jessica's posture, new certainty in her movements. The painful unraveling of her marriage had awakened something in her, a resilience that reminded me of my younger self. The divorce papers are filed, she told me after Emma had fallen asleep on the living room couch, surrounded by stuffed animals. Drew's lawyer called mine today, suddenly eager to settle quickly and quietly. Apparently, Timothy thinks the public battle has done enough damage to their business interests. How are you feeling about everything? I asked carefully. Jessica stared into her tea for a long moment. Sad, angry, relieved, all at once. She looked up at me, but mostly determined. I've been thinking a lot about what I want to do next. And what's that? Remember how I always loved the administrative side of the clinic when I worked there summers? The systems, the scheduling, the insurance. Navigation? Her eyes brightened. What if I came back, not as a physical therapist, but as operations director? I could handle the business aspects you've always disliked, modernize what actually needs modernizing, and let you focus entirely on patient care and clinical leadership. I sat back, considering her proposal. You'd want to work at Healing Pathways, after everything that's happened? Because of everything that's happened, she corrected. I've seen what the alternative looks like. Drew and his father's version of healthcare. I want no part of that world. She leaned forward earnestly. I have the business degree, the management training. But unlike Drew, I also have your values, Mom. I grew up watching you build something that matters. I want Emma to see me building something. That matters too. As the Seattle rain tapped gently against the windows, so like that Sunday when Drew had tried to take everything, I realized we had come full circle. Not back to where we started, but to a new beginning neither of us could have anticipated. Let's talk about job descriptions tomorrow, I said, smiling. I think Healing Pathways might have an opening for a qualified operations director. Jessica's answering smile held both relief and determination. I promise I won't let you down. I know you won't, I replied, reaching across the table to squeeze her hand. You never really did. 1 year later, the Healing Pathways anniversary celebration filled our expanded community room with laughter, conversation, and the unmistakable energy of a mission thriving. Staff members, mingled with patients past and present, sharing stories and updates. The catering table groaned with food prepared by Mrs. Gonzalez, our former stroke patient, who had not only regained function, but had recently opened a small catering business specializing in healthy Colombian cuisine. Jessica moved through the crowd with confidence, stopping to chat with insurance representatives, equipment, vendors, and staff members, every inch the capable operations director she had become. In 12 short months, she had streamlined our scheduling system, negotiated better insurance terms, and implemented technology upgrades that improved efficiency without sacrificing patient care. Revenue had increased 15%, while patient satisfaction scores remained at their legendary highs. Emma, now 3, trailed her mother in a little white dress with purple flowers, occasionally stopping to collect high fives from therapists who had watched her grow from a baby to a chattering preschooler. I stood near the windows, observing it all with quiet satisfaction. The past year hadn't been without challenges. Jessica's divorce had turned acrimonious before finally settling. Drew had left Seattle for a corporate position in Chicago, and we'd weathered the usual healthcare industry hurdles of regulatory changes and insurance complications. But through it all, Healing Pathways had not merely survived. It had flourished. Our Independent Care Alliance had grown to include 37 providers across the region, creating a support network that helped smaller practices maintain independence, while sharing resources and expertise. "Quite a party," said a familiar voice beside me. Claire Matthews had traded her usual lawyer attire for a relaxed pantsuit, champagne flute in hand. Hard to believe it was just a year ago we were plotting legal strategy against the Collins men. I smiled at my longtime attorney and now friend. Sometimes I still can't believe how it all unfolded. "I can," Claire replied. "You built something genuine, something that actually matters to people. That's more powerful than any corporate strategy, in the end." Across the room, Senator Wilson was deep in conversation with Dr. Chen from Seattle General and 2 other physicians who had joined our coalition. The senator had become a vocal advocate for independent healthcare providers, even introducing legislation to protect them from predatory acquisition practices. The clinic itself had undergone subtle transformations. Jessica's operational improvements had indeed modernized our systems, but in ways that enhanced rather than diminished our core mission. The addition of 3 new treatment rooms and specialized equipment for pediatric patients had expanded our capacity without sacrificing the personal attention that defined us. Perhaps the most meaningful change was the training program we'd launched 6 months earlier, accepting 4 recent physical therapy graduates each year for intensive mentorship in our approach to patient-centered care. It was our answer to the corporate model, not expansion through acquisition, but growth through education, sending well-trained practitioners into the community with our values intact. Maria approached with a small elderly woman I didn't immediately recognize. "Dr. Caldwell, you remember Mrs. Larson? She was one of your very first patients when you opened." "Of course." Eleanor Larson. 27 years ago, she'd come to my tiny office with debilitating back pain after 3 other providers had dismissed her symptoms as normal aging. She'd been my 3rd patient ever. "Mrs. Larson, how wonderful to see you." I embraced her gently. "How are you doing?" "Still gardening, still dancing, still living on my own at 87, she replied with a mischievous smile. "All because you listened when no one else would. I've been following your story in the news, dear. So proud to tell everyone my physical therapist stood up to those corporate types." Her simple pride touched me deeply. This was what Drew and Timothy Collins had never understood, the human connections that formed the true foundation of Healing Pathways. No spreadsheet could capture their value. No acquisition offer could compensate for their loss. As the celebration continued around us, Jessica approached with Emma in her arms. "Mom, it's time for the toast and the announcement." We had planned this moment carefully. The clinic's 28th anniversary seemed the perfect occasion to unveil the next phase in our evolution. Jessica tapped a spoon against her water glass, and the room gradually quieted. "Thank you all for being here today," she began, her voice clear and confident. "Patients, providers, supporters, friends, you're all part of the Healing Pathways family." She glanced at me with a smile. 28 years ago, my mother opened a tiny clinic with nothing but student loan debt and an unwavering commitment to patient-centered care. Today, we celebrate not just survival, but growth and renewal. I stepped forward to join her. Healing Pathways has always been about creating a legacy of care that extends beyond any single person, even its founder. Murmurs rippled through the crowd, which is why today, we're announcing the creation of the Healing Pathways Foundation. Jessica continued seamlessly. The foundation will provide scholarships for physical therapy students committed to independent practice, grants for established practitioners wanting to maintain their independence, and community outreach programs bringing physical therapy to underserved populations. And, I added, as our first major initiative, we're opening a second Healing Pathways location in the Rainier Valley next month, serving a community with limited access to quality physical therapy. Applause erupted, led enthusiastically by Senator Wilson. As it quieted, Jessica handed Emma to me and raised her glass. To my mother, Dr. Diane Caldwell, who taught me that some legacies aren't measured in dollars. To our amazing staff, who chose purpose over profit. To our patients, who trusted us with their healing journeys. And to Healing Pathways, not just a clinic, but a community, a philosophy, and a future we're building together. Glasses raised throughout the room. Emma, not understanding the ceremony but feeling its importance, solemnly raised, her sippy cup causing ripples of laughter. Later, as the party wound down and staff began the cleanup process, Jessica found me in my office. I was standing at the window, watching the sunset paint Seattle's skyline in shades of gold and rose. "Penny, for your thoughts?" she asked, joining me. "I was thinking about Clause 4.3, I admitted with a small smile. About how a single paragraph, written years ago out of caution, ended up protecting everything that mattered." Jessica nodded thoughtfully. "I've been meaning to ask you, did you somehow know? Did you anticipate someone like Drew trying to take control someday?" "Not specifically," I replied, "but I'd worked too hard, sacrificed too much to leave anything to chance. The clause was my insurance policy against future uncertainty. I just never expected that uncertainty would come in the form of my own son-in-law." "Ex-son-in-law," Jessica corrected firmly, "and good riddance." The bitterness that had characterized her early divorce process had gradually softened into something more like resigned wisdom. Drew's departure from Seattle had helped, allowing her to rebuild her life without constant reminders of what had been lost. Or, rather, what she had outgrown. "You know," Jessica said after a moment, "I got an email from Drew last week. First direct communication in months." My eyebrows raised in surprise. "What did he want?" "To tell me that Cascade Health Partners is under federal investigation for billing fraud and patient care violations." She shook her head. "Several of their acquired clinics have lost accreditation. Their stock is tanking. He claimed he had no knowledge of the improprieties and has left the company." A small, satisfied smile touched her lips. "He also mentioned he's between positions currently." "And how did that make you feel?" I asked carefully. Jessica considered the question. Vindicated but not vengeful. Mostly I just felt free, like the final thread connecting me to that part of my life had been cut. She turned to face me fully. "What we're building here, the foundation, the new location, the training program, it's so much more meaningful than anything Drew or his father ever envisioned. They wanted to acquire something. We're creating something." Emma appeared in the doorway, clutching a plate with a slightly mangled piece of cake. "For you, Grandma," she announced, proudly. As I accepted the gift from my granddaughter, watching Jessica Gentle correct her on the proper way to carry dessert, I felt a profound sense of completion. Drew had tried to take everything I'd built with a stack of contracts and arrogant assumptions. Instead, he had inadvertently strengthened my legacy, brought my daughter back into the fold, and clarified exactly what mattered most. The clinic would continue beyond me now. Not as a corporate acquisition or a profitable asset, but as a living embodiment of values that transcended business metrics. Compassion, integrity, personalized care, genuine healing. Later that evening, after everyone had gone and I walked alone through the quiet treatment rooms, I remembered Drew's confident smirk as he slid those contract papers across my dining room table a year ago. "You can retire peacefully now," he'd said, so certain of his victory. I hadn't needed Clause 4.3 to retire peacefully. I'd needed it to ensure I could continue working purposefully, and to guarantee that when I eventually did step back, it would be on my terms, with my vision intact, my legacy secured not through legal language, but through lives touched and values transmitted. Outside, Seattle's evening rain began its gentle percussion against the windows, so like that Sunday when everything had nearly been lost, and yet so different now. I touched the clinic's sign as I locked up for the night, feeling the raised letters beneath my fingertips. Healing pathways. Not just a name or a business, but a promise kept, a journey continued, a future assured. Some legacies, I thought as I stepped into the rain, couldn't be acquired. They could only be built, protected, and passed forward, one healing pathway at a time.